Okay, so I've just moved back inside again where the wind's not blowing and hopefully where you can see what I'm going to do with these tailor's tacks a bit better. I've actually got two different colours of thread, and this is something that you can do with your projects too, is I'm going to put the red thread, the side where the pleat, the bulk of the pleat has to go towards, if that makes sense. So on the pattern, you might not be able to see from where you are, but there's an arrow showing which side the pleats have to fold to each other. So what I'm going to do is on each of the ones where I am going to fold towards that side, I'm going to make a tailor's tack at the end. So to take a tailor's tack, we've got a needle threaded just with two strands of, it's one strand of thread doubled over, get my words right, and I've not got a knot on the end there. So at the end here, I'm just going to take a little bite through both pieces of my fabric and my pattern and just pull it through, but leave a nice long tail, a couple of inches. And then I'm going to then go at right angles to that, so you're making almost like a little bullseye in the middle of your threads on the underneath. And then I'm going to pull my thread through again and leave another 2-inch loop. So I've got a 2-inch loop here, a 2-inch loop, and then I'm going to snip my thread off, again leaving 2 inches. It looks like it's quite a lot, but you need to be able to pull your fabric apart. So then you just snip through the loop and you just leave a nice long tail like that. So let's do another one. So again, got my thread, going to make a little bite out of my fabric, leaving 2 inches tail, and go at right angles to that. So you almost go north, south, east, west on these. So north and south is your first stitch, east and west is your second stitch. Leave a tail of 2 inches, snip through your loop and snip your thread off. And that will each time will give you a nice long amount of thread to be able to work with. Let's do this one just here. So I'm just doing all the red ones first, just to make it a little bit more time effective. And snipping that off, and that's there. Okay, so if I bring this up to the camera, we've got our threads here, which are loose, and I'll show you what to do with those in a moment when I've just finished doing the rest of these tailor's tacks on this pattern. Okay, so I've just put all of those tailor's tacks in. You can see, hopefully you can see all my little tassels all just staying down here. The white thread doesn't show up very well on the white pattern piece, but hopefully when I remove this you will. So I'm going to take out my pins now. Make sure I don't lose those, because these are my fine silk pins. Okay. And now what you're going to do is you're just going to take one corner of your pattern and very carefully hold your fabric down with one hand, is you're just going to peel your pattern pieces back, and you're going to leave your tails of your tailor's tacks. Just put your finger on the thread and it'll just pull straight through the pattern pieces, so long as you've cut through all your loops, that is. And just remember that I have already marked the notches on the edge here as well with my snips. I did that while I was outside, but might have missed that. Okay, so the pattern piece just pulls straight off this way. Okay, I'm going to keep that to one side because we still need to mark the lining. And then what we do then is we've got the two pieces of fabric just here. We're just going to pull the two pieces of fabric apart as well. And as you can see, we've got this loop here of the threads. Hopefully you can see that. And what we're going to do is, because we want to leave a nice long tail on the other end, so this is why we need them all to be the same length so that we know how much we can pull through. As we pull through, we just take our snips and just snip through those threads halfway through, and it leaves a mark on one side and a mark on the other. So again, we're going to pull those threads through, arm out the way, and then just snip through. And it just leaves this little, careful not to snip your fabric, but it just leaves a little mark on your fabric. I've done a little tutorial on these on my channel anyway about threads for making tailor's tacks. Just hold onto your fabric and it'll just allow you just to separate those two layers. Don't go too fast, otherwise you'll miss one, and then you'll pull it through and you'll have to line your pattern back up again in order to make that go through. And at the end of it, you'll end up with two bits of fabric, and they'll both be marked identically with your tufts of thread showing you where your tailor's tacks are. So hopefully you can see those. But I also need to remember what to do on here is to keep this in the right orientation so that I know right and left, or top and bottom should I say. Right back and bottom back. But we're going to use these quite gently as well, work with these, because these threads on the one side can just pull straight through. So you do just need to be careful with that. So let me go and mark up my lining and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've finished marking the tailor's tacks on each of my fabrics. Now I'm going to work with the lining because I think this is easier for you to see, but I will be doing the same thing with each of my pattern pieces, both the patterned and what have you. I'm taking it out of sync really with the patterns on the instructions on the patterns, because what I want to do is I don't want to lose these marks that I've already done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack my pleats in at this point now, before I've actually done any of the other seams in the construction process, because that just locks in those reference points. So we've got the red and we've got the white thread. I'm going to use white thread for sewing them together. Just have my needle threaded ready. And what I'm going to do is we're going to decide which is the right side and which is the wrong side of our lining. That's the wrong side. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my pins and I'm going to put it through the centre of the mark in the white tailor's tack and take it through to the centre of the red tailor's tack. And I'm going to push the fibres together, the fabrics together, so that's sitting nicely. And then I'm going to match up my my notches on the top edge. Then when my pin is sitting straight, I'm just going to put a pin in, 2 pins in for each one. And I'm probably going to just tack these whilst I'm here. So what we're ended up with, if I open up the 2 sides of fabric, is you've got this little loop in the centre here, which is my pleat. And on the outside we can see we've got our pleat forming just here. So I'm working on the inside of the garment, and that's what I've done. So I've just got 2 pins across. So there's the white and there's the red. And then that's just holding it through, and I've got the notches together at the top. So I'm just going to take my thread, I'm just going to put a quick knot in. You've seen me do that hundreds of times. Oops, one will do. And then starting at the point of going through where the tailor's tacks are, I'm just going to put a couple of stitches in, taking care not to pull my threads tight. And well, they are tight, they're flat with the fabric, but they're not tight in terms of adding any tension onto that. So literally that's all I'm going to do for each one. Put off my threads, remove my pins, and there we are, we've got a tacked pleat. When we open it up, we've got this, we've got the straight on the fabric, and that's just going to hold it in place. So this is the pleats are not sewn down on the actual garment itself. If they were, I could then go to the sewing machine and just sew that in, but they're not. I'm just holding those down so that when we're sewing it, the fabric stays straight. I also know, because of the colour of the thread, that this pleat will get pressed that way through when it's sewn. So the other thing that I can do now is just put a little tack along the top here, and that will just also hold that pleat in place along the top. I didn't even have to ask you to remind me, did I? Did quite well there for me. Okay. So just going to tack this along the top so that it just lies flat. And that takes out the excess fabric out of the waist and just holds that steady so that we've got that pleat marked for us. Okay, so hopefully that all made sense and you followed along with me. Now, if these come out, it doesn't matter because we've already used them to mark the placement that we needed. So let's do the next one. So we've got our red and our white thread, and to take our pin, put it through, in this case the red one, and go through to the white. Oh, see, I've just caught the threads with my finger, look, and it's just come out. So luckily we were just working with that. Okay, we're then going to also match up our notches on our waist. So these are just roughly tacked in. As I say, if we need any extra room in the waist at all, as we're constructing the garment when we get to the fit stage, we can just loosen off some of these and it's not going to be any trouble. So it's just nice and easy to work with. So again, got my thread. So I did a quick knot. So needle in one hand, put your threads at right angles, making a cross, and hold it with your thumb. Wrap your thread round it twice and hold on to the threads on the needle, and then just push through as you pull the thread all the way through to the bottom, and you'll just have a nice little knot on the end there. And I'm using the knot at the bottom edge because then when I want to undo this, I can just pull on that thread and it'll just pull the tacking stitches straight out for me. So again, big tacking stitches up to where the notches are on the waist. These need to be as accurate as we can. And I just do an extra stitch just at the bottom there to hold that. Snip the threads and then take the pins out. And then again, because I've colour coded these, we know that this pleat now is going to go towards the other one because it goes towards the red side. So I can see here, this is the red side. So I'm just going to fold that pleat across to the side, matching up my waist seam there. Oh, didn't put a knot in my thread to hold this. So again, making sure we don't pull on those fibres at all. Just go a little bit past it so it holds it flat, because we don't want these to turn as we're stitching either, because that'll create bulk in the waistband. So we want these to sit nice and flat, and again just a double stitch just to hold that tight. So there we go, we have got 2 pleats marked in our fabric, both going the right way for the pattern. It's created a box pleat, and from the inside this is what it looks like. So the excess fabric that we've taken out of the waistband is here, and they will just sit flat there. If you wanted to, you could just tack down the other side as well, just to make sure they're actually, you know, they really are secure, and I might well do that. But as you can see, it just takes a few moments to do that, but that then secures those down. So I'm going to work through the lining and through the main fabric now, and just tack all of these pleats in on each of those garments. I'm going to leave the tailor's tacks in because it's a good reference point if any of my tacking stitches do come undone. They shouldn't do, but if they do, then that's fine. I'm not going to press these in until we finish the garment as well, and it's actually a get your words right, Claire. They're soft pleats. It's not a fixed pleat, so it's not something that we need to go and sew down at all. We're just going to have these here, and then when we finish, we're just going to pull on the knot, undo the stitch, and it'll just pull straight out for us for the final construction. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next hour. So I won't take you with me. I'll just explain what I'm doing, and I'll see you later. Okay, so in the interest of authenticity, I'm just going to say here, disregard everything I was saying about how I've tacked down my pleats. It is a really good way how to tack down pleats, but for the Upton, let's not do it that way. So what happened was I carried on sewing down my pleats, as you can probably see just here, and then I held the skirt up, this is the lining front up against me, and it was way too big. So obviously the internet was good for me, and the universe was good at all of you screaming at me, don't do it that way for the Upton. So I'm just going to correct myself, but in the interest of authenticity, I thought I'd just keep it in, because whilst we say measure twice, cut once, we also say read the instructions as well for the book. So actually, when I look at the instructions here, we have to take the pleats in to the centre notch. So that's what I'm going to do with you, because if anybody else has made this or struggled making this, then hopefully this little chat through will make sense. So what I had to do was, if I just take out my pins, I have got a thread missing now from this point here, but I know where it is. I'm going to take the white threads on the outside and do the same thing that we did before. So white to white in terms of our pleat, and the outer notches together as well. So that then gives us a much bigger pleat than we had before. I'm just going to pin that in for now. Because then, so this is what we've got now. So it's much bigger than what I was working with before. And then what we need to do then is we need to then find the notch in the centre of all of these, which is there for me. And then we're going to match that up with the centre of the pleat. Now when I pull my fabric down and straighten it out, what I saw was that the red pleats that I got are actually on the outside here. So the red Tailor's tacks are on the outside. So that feels like it's right. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to undo everything I did. Thank goodness I checked it after just doing the skirt front. I'm now going to tack along this line just here. So let's just do that. If I've got a needle and thread ready for you, which I haven't. So I do have my needle and thread ready. I'm going to put a little knot at the end. And what I'm going to do now is sew from the points up through the white. So if you've used the same colour as me, this was the outer points on the pleats. So my apologies for going wrong, but that's what happens. We're all learning, aren't we? So they match together through the centre. And also it's a good idea to check as you're going along as well. Check fit, check positioning, it does help. And then what I'm going to do now is we've got a big loop here, is I'm going to find the notch that's in the centre there and put that against where my seams are together. I'm going to do another one in a minute just to show you. And when you straighten that out, the red threads are on the outside. So where's my needle gone? So what I'm going to do now is just tack this into place. So in theory, the principles of what I said were right in terms of how to mark your pleats, and that might be useful for other projects, but actually the placement for when we actually then came to put the pleats together was the bit that went awry. Oops. Try not to sew me in the process. So just come out here. So what I'll do is I'll show you the difference between the two pleats. So those were the pleats that I was making, and they didn't join in the middle. And then this is the one big pleat now that I've got. And this is why it's called a box pleat, because when you look at it, it's got the pleat on the inside. And what I want to make sure is that that is correct. Yes, it is. Because then when we do the others, the next side, it's going to give this nice boxed appearance. So again, what I am going to do is I'm just going to tack this down as well from the red mark up to tack those in. So some bits are the same, but obviously it was very wrong. So I can't even get out of it that way, can I? So when I finish with this one here, that just lying flat, I'll hold it up and show you. Right, so there we go. So that's what it's going to look like when we finish. We've got the tacking stitches and the tacking stitch just holding that together. We don't want those edges to overlap, and we don't want them to be gappy either. So the edges together of your pleat at your seam line point need to be absolutely smooth together. Yeah? So just make sure you do that. So let's do the next one. I'm going to use the back of my needle to take out my tacking threads. So if we use the point, we can pull a thread, so we don't want to do that. You just pull that, tacking comes out really easily. And on this one as well. So these are really big pleats, which makes sense because the pattern on the front of it is really big as well. Pattern picture, that is, that's what I meant to say. So again, we've got our next set of pleats here. Let's get my thread ready. Okay, so we've got another pleat here to do. So we've got our our outer white thread. Just going to put a pin through the middle of the white one on the outside and match it up with a place on the other side of the other one. So we've got one coming through that side, one through that side. Just leaving the pin just loose at the moment and just lining up the notches on the waistline. That should then allow the fabric to sit straight. If you just wiggle your pin a little bit, it'll just fall flat. So there we've got our pleat marked in. Needle and thread. And I'm just tacking, not tightly, just loosely along that pleated line just to hold it in place. Making sure to end up at the notches because that's the important match point. Stick my threads. Right, okay. Take the pins out. And then we've got a notch in the centre of the pleat, just here. So we're going to smoosh this down so that that notch, little cut, matches up with the centre of that pleat where we've just tacked with that back seam line. I'm just going to put a pin in either side just to hold that excess fabric down for me. Just make sure it's nice and even because we don't want to lose any of that fabric, that definition of that pleat. Then take our needle and thread again. Knot on the end, and then I'm just tacking along the top here to just hold that into place. I think I keep turning everything away from me, don't I? My apologies. That's just got caught. Little back stitch just to hold that in place. Okay, take the needle out here. So what we've got is we've got this gappy seam here, but those 2 points match together, the 2 edges of that seam match together, and then that matches up with a notch and on the flat. So on the flat we've got this pleated bit here, and then what I have been doing, just as I said before, I want to keep these pleats lying flat, is we've then got the red tailor's tack. And I'm just flattening that down along the edge of the work, so it's just flat, and then I'm just tacking that down just to make sure it doesn't come out of place whilst we're sewing these pleats down. Literally it just takes seconds, but it's going to be a useful tip, I think, for you, hopefully, to get a good result. Sometimes doing a little bit of extra work saves us time in unpicking at the end. So again, let's see this one. So we've got the red one there where it's all loose at the moment and flopping around. So I'm just taking that as my reference point, flattening it down, and then just sewing it up, making sure not to make the stitches too tight, up towards the waistband. I've started from the outside and going into the middle because I think that's safest. Otherwise it's very easy to lose your bearings as you're going along. So that's how it looks from the inside, and that's how it looks from the outside. Okay, so I've just got one more to do, and then we'll try it. I'm going to then hold it up against me and make sure that the skirt has enough width to go round my middle from my centre seams, and the centre front sits right here and down to the seam, so that we know that I'm going to be able to get into it when it's finished. So again, it just, because we've not toiled the skirt, I've only toiled the bodice, then this is just a quick safety check really before we start sewing everything up to make sure that the fit on the skirt is on the right track. So I'm just removing those old incorrect basting lines, and so they come out quite nice and easily. Taking out these basting lines as well because they are too incorrect, wrong, whatever word we want to use. Say pride comes before a fall, doesn't it? But again, I'm documenting my journey I'm not professing to be an expert to anybody. But hopefully it reassures you if you're working on a different project at the moment that everybody gets it wrong sometimes. Okay. So this is my last lot of pleats, and then we'll see how we get on with this. So bear with me, and I'll be back to you once I've finished this and checked it up against myself to make sure that it still fits.